name's Richard Walsh, and I played the character Bert Quigley, nicknamed SIcknote, for 12 years, basically, from around about 1988 to 2000. Well, it's a long time ago now. I can't. I mean, this was originally for the pilot, which was ostensibly a one-off film, which was made in 1986. Um, I mean, I was just asked by my agent to go to a reading of a new TV pilot written by Jack Rosenthal. So my ears pricked up because he's a very famous writer. And I read for, there was a preliminary meeting with the director, Les Blair. And I can't remember if the casting director was there, Corinne Rodriguez. And we talked and I read a bit, and that was it. Then I was called back to do a reading with some other members who eventually turned up in the cast. But I didn't read for the character I played originally. I read for Bayleaf, I read for Vaseline, and I read for SIcknote and Charisma, I think. I think I read, we were swapping parts around. It's kind of what you do. They were trying to work out who might be best for which part. And then there was yet another read through with most of the people I'd been at the first read through with, but not all. Some had gone by the wayside. But this time there were sandwiches and drinks. And so we thought we had a good chance that we were going to get the part. So that's how you tell when you're an actor. And yeah, and the part they had to me was SIcknote, and I was very happy to get it because we'd all read the script by then. We thought it was very exciting. Yeah, although I did subsequently find out that the casting director, Corinne Rodriguez, had spotted me in a musical that I'd been in called The Hired Man, a musical written by Melvyn Bragg, which had been on at the Astoria. And she'd seen me in that and thought I might be good for her next project. How she got from playing a kind of Lothario in The Hired Man to SIcknote in London's Burning is beyond me. But she obviously saw something that she thought was usable. There you go. When we did the original, the pilot, we were all based at Dockhead Fire Station, which became Blackwall for the purposes of the series, which is in Southwark. And it was a reasonably quiet fire station. I think it had been very busy in the old days when the docks were still very much a going thing in London. But these days, a lot of the other fire stations called it Sleepy Hollow because it was really a bit, quiet. Let's put it that way. So it was a good place to use as a base. And we used all the interiors of the fire stations as well. That kind of cramped thing of being in the mess and eating, and the bedrooms, the dormitories as they were, and that's how we learned to slide down the pole and do all that nonsense, and to drive the fire engine because I was one of the drivers as well. But once the series started picking up, I think the first series was late '88 into '89. I'm not sure on that, but you can find out. And it became a going concern. It was obvious London Weekend Television wanted more of it. It became more economical to build the characters' houses in a studio setting. And we were still on location, obviously, for burning things down and flooding things, whatever else we did. And you'd probably have 2 or 3 days, maybe more, depending on how difficult the action was. So on a 2-week schedule, you'd probably have a week outside, playing fireman, and then a week inside with your domestic life. Yeah. So that's pretty much how it worked out. So it was an even split, really. I mean, we burned down half of southeast London. I don't think there's any of it left now, but happy days. The nicknames were, it's like in the services, in the army and the navy, that everyone has nicknames. And the London Fire Brigade, as it was called then, the LFB, was run a bit like the services. I mean, the changes when we did it, first of all, in '86 to now, are extraordinary, quite frankly. You wouldn't recognize it. We had wooden ladders when we started with, You think to yourself, wouldn't they catch fire? So the nicknames were a big thing. And Jack Rosenthal, who wrote it, was very good friends and used to drink with a guy who was an ex-fireman, I think from either Archway or Highgate, one of those stations in North London. And he would tell him stories over a couple of pints, whatever, of the various people. No names, no pack drill, but they was, they had nicknames like Charisma because he didn't have any. And but SIcknote was a guy that was called a rather less flattering name, I believe, at his fire station. But he was a guy who was always trying to swing the lead, get on light duties. Because if you're on light duties, you've got a strained arm or something, or a bad case of toothache or whatever, and you got a little note, you've got to stay in what they call the box, which is as you enter a fire station, it's the office really. It's the admin office where the fire brigade shouts come through on a teleprinter, and you rip it off and you tell everybody what you've got, fire up the road and we need both engines. And so if you're in the box, you didn't have to go out and do much physical work. Of course, nowadays, because sadly, because of violence against fire brigade people, which has happened, sort of basically hooligans and thuggery, they won't leave anybody alone in the box, so everybody goes out on the fire engine. But that's why it was a case of called swinging the lead, really. A lot of us were inexperienced. I hadn't done very much TV before, but several of them had. People like James Hazeldine and James Marcus had done a lot of TV, and it was a learning curve, really. People like Jimmy Hazeldine were very useful to me for in terms of how to act for the camera rather than act for the stage. I'd mostly been a stage actor, a lot of musicals and straight plays, and. But it's all very, we all got on extremely well. I still see 2 or 3 of them on a fairly regular basis. And no, we were a pretty happy band, really. It wasn't an immense amount of socializing outside. There wasn't much time for it. I mean, it was a very tight schedule. You 10-day turnaround in those 2 weeks, and often working weekends because that's the only time you can get roads closed off. The police won't let you do it in the middle of the week because the people are going to work. But so if you want to burn something down, do it on a Sunday morning. That was the sort of motto. But no, we all got on famously well, actually. I struggled to think of any rows at all when we were filming it. Yeah, I always liked the stuff. SIcknote's hobby was amateur dramatics, and he and his wife belonged to an amateur dramatic society. And we did a panto in one, and the student prince in another, and they were loosely based on my own experiences of amateur drama in Tunbridge Wells when I was a 15, 16-year-old and still at school, and how seriously or how not so seriously some members of those societies took it. And when it was obvious it was going to go to a series after the pilot, the producer asked me what did he think that if SIcknote carried on as a character, he could do as a hobby, because we would start to explore the firemen's private lives as well as their lives as firemen. And so I came up with this thing that I remembered about being in the amateur dramatics in Tunbridge Wells, and how amusing some of those situations could be, and the script writers loved it. And so that's where my character went, and those rehearsals and things were very, very enjoyable and funny. Oh, fine, we got on famously. Didn't he become a vicar eventually or something? I think he took holy orders and became a man of the cloth. Now, he was very funny, just camp enough to be that type of producer, and very like some of the people I worked with in amateur dramatics, who don't get me wrong, were lovable and very warm people, but kind of thought, well, they were a little over the top, a little larger than life, let's put it that way. But Richard Sims was a terrific character, playing the producer, calling everybody darling and poppet and lovey, and in that sort of Richard Attenborough vein. No, very nice man. Well, what? I mean, that would be telling tales, wouldn't it? No, Amanda was fantastic. The funny thing was that you probably know this if you've done your research, but in the original pilot, Jean Quigley was played by somebody totally differently. Joanne Zorian, I think. I mean, my memory serves me right. And she wasn't available, I believe, when they wanted to cast a wife in the last episode of the first series, which was when there was a siege in the fire station. And she was one of the wives waiting outside for when the firemen got released, where they were hostages. And so they cast Amanda, who I didn't know from a hole in the ground. But we struck up a great relationship, and I've seen her a lot since. I mean, we have the occasional reunion. She doesn't change. I mean, it's frightening. I mean, she looks exactly the same as she did 20 years ago, and she was just wonderful. I mean, she was really like too good-looking and exotic to be SIcknote's wife. But I think that was half the joke of the producers. I mean, walking around the street in real life. And when you were recognised, I mean, the builders on the scaffolding would shout, "Oh, it's SIcknote, your wife, she's all right, isn't she? Where do you manage to get hold of her?" And I don't know, but I mean, I thought it was a very good counterpoint that SIcknote, being this very sort of pompous, uptight, balding fireman, was married to this very exotic woman, And even their bed scenes weren't sexy; they were hysterical. They were more like Morecambe and Wise bed scenes. She'd be reading the latest romance, and I'd be reading a book on global warming or something. And she was brilliant to work with. I mean, just brilliant. We got on like a house on fire. I've forgotten all about that storyline. Yeah, that's true. I can't even remember how it ended up. He tried to run away and do all sorts of things. He was a bit naughty, but I think we carried on looking after him. Yeah, I've got to say, I mean, I recall very little of that storyline. But yeah, we did have it, and the reason we had it was because in our characters, Jean had a miscarriage in the series before, I think, and we were so desperately looking forward to this child, sort of late in our marriage, that the producers thought it might be a good idea to try and foster a kid. Yeah, I mean, it was addressing social issues. I mean, London's Burning tried to do, a lot of that, as a lot of TV series do. Casualty does the same thing, doesn't it? And you're addressing the runaway kids and the trouble kids and whatever. Yeah, and old people, of which I'm now one, of course. But yeah, no, but I mean, I'm sure it was a fun storyline, but I don't remember it being it wasn't emotional like playing the stuff when Jean was having the miscarriage. Because that was kind of personal, because it's happened in my life as well. So that was very emotional to play. We weren't terribly naughty with the pranks. I mean, apart from little things we played on each other. But I mean, the younger kids were like that, John Alford and Stephen North, and I was a bit too. I was one of the older members of the. I can't remember how old I was when I finished doing it. 40 something, 46, 47, which was fine. I mean, I don't know how much you know about the brigade, in as much as certainly when we were filming it, you could be 30 years in the brigade, and you had to retire by the time you'd done 30 years, or when you reached 55, whichever came the sooner. So if you joined at 20, you could retire at 50, put it that way. No, I mean, I mostly remember the excitement. I mean, the very first shot we were ever on in the first series, not the pilot, I remember Rupert Baker and I, who played Malcolm, rushing into a fire in a block of flats over in the East End. And they said action, and in we went and put the fire out in 2 seconds with our hoses. And then we couldn't see anything, because the room was so full of smoke where we put it out, literally the cameras couldn't penetrate it. And we were hawking out, I mean, leaning out of the windows, coughing up all sorts of muck off our chests. And it was that was part of the learning curve, because nobody had really filmed fire before. And the camera crew, whatever, it didn't realize that you couldn't actually convey on screen just how dense smoke was in a fire like that. So they learned after a while that you blew smoke in. If you wanted to see the firemen's faces, which they do, they probably want to see their heroes' faces when they're doing this stuff, you have to be a bit canny about it. And so a lot of the fires you see were flame bars, gas flame bars lit up, which reflect really well in those glass helmets. and smoke being shoved in by the props guys from behind you as you went. And so it was just enough to look impenetrable, but not enough to make it impossible for the viewers to see what's going on. I mean, if you show someone a room full of completely full of smoke, there's no point, is there? And I particularly remember the shot which we filmed up in RAF Swinderby in Lincoln, which was when we had a whole load of exploding oxygen cylinders flying around like torpedoes in the air, which was unbelievably scary. Even though the actual ones were made of wood, they were landing everywhere. And a lot of fire. Back of my jacket caught fire in that one. Always a fireman there to put you out. They love doing that, of course. Because don't forget, we had the Royal Fire Brigade on hand in case there was any danger or anything went wrong. And they would literally turn around to you at the end of a take and say, "Oh, I think Richard needs putting out," and then the full force of the hose would be on you because they just thought that was hysterically funny. But that was an amazing shout, exploding caravans, and of course we could do what we like. It was an old deserted RAF base, and it looked like a housing estate for where all the officers' houses were, and so we could just light up what we liked. So I think the special effects boys had a ball that week. So. Yeah, to answer your question, before we ever started doing the pilot, the assembled crew were taken to Southwark Training School, which it's closed now, but that was the major training school for the London Fire Brigade, where we were put through a shortened course of everything that the recruits were put through. This was a 2-week course, and we were like a little band of soldiers, basically. We had to march around the parade ground like a bunch of squaddies would. We were taught everything from how to use the hoses, how to roll the hoses up and put them back on the fire engine properly, how to get into fire hydrants, attach hoses, how to crawl through tiny little spaces, claustrophobic little spaces, how to wear the breathing apparatus, which weighed a bloody ton, how to drive the fire engine, in my case. We were taken out to waste ground, out now where the O2 is. What was it called when it was first built, that thing? Maybe it was always called the O2, I can't remember. But you know what I mean, that dome with all the bits sticking out of it, the arena. And that was waste ground there. It was being built. It was the site of the old Tate and Lyle Millennium Falls building, where the sugar refinery, Silvertown on the Isle of Dogs. And it was a blazing hot summer when we were filming that. And we'd hang around, probably smoking in those days, I can't remember, having cups of tea. And you didn't know when it was going to happen. One of the trainers would blow a whistle, and you all had to dive into your respective fire engines, and he would give you the directions. You'd scream off through the streets, going to this imaginary fire, told which stairs to go up, where the fire hydrant was attached, as if you were doing it for real. And there's no doubt that, I certainly wouldn't be brave enough to be a fireman. They are very brave people. I mean, let's face it, it's one of the few jobs you do where you could end up dead at the end of the day. So, I mean, let's make that mistake. They're brave people. But in terms of handling the equipment, I think most of us ended up being pretty good at it because we were taught so well. And also, when we went back for each subsequent series, we had a short refresher course because there was always new machinery being added to the fire brigade, and they wanted London's Burning to be the showcase for the brigade. So if they got I remember when we got the Halmetro. The Halmetro gear is for cutting people out of cars and spreading busted bits of machinery and car wrecks. And this was all very new. It's works by hydraulics, I believe. And so if they wanted to show that off, then it would be put into an episode of London's Burning. And of course, if you lifted up the side lockers of our appliances, they'd be full of all the most brand new, wonderful gear. And if we took it to a real fire station, which we often did, down to Old Kent Road or Southwark or something, they'd look up and they'd say, "We've got none of this equipment." Okay, but that's the point was, we had brand new fire engines, which the TV company owned, all the state-of-the-art gear, because we had to be the London Fire Brigade at its best, basically. They were showing off through us. Well, the second one was Nick Georgiadis, who was played by Andrew Casimir. Yeah, we're still very good friends with his wife and his kids, and we lived very close to each other in southwest London, and we were in and out of each other's houses for years. They live down on the coast now, near Eastbourne. But yeah, still very good friends. And yeah, we got on. Andrew and I had a great love of racehorses, and we even owned half a racehorse each between us at one stage. And yeah, so he was the one I got on with best out of the station officers, yeah. But only really for that reason. Jimmy Marcus, who started it, was a lovely fellow. But he was getting to the age when he probably would have had to retire from the force, and so they let him go, and they brought in this guy because he was a bit of a heartthrob for the housewives, you know, just like me. I was a bit of a heartthrob for the short-sighted housewives, in a way, yes. Only suffice to say that people often have memories of how tough it was on shoots. I mean, I've got friends that were on the bill and they had unhappy times, and same on casualty. But there never was a row in all the time. I mean, it may have been in the production office for all I know, but I mean, amongst the actors and the characters, it was a very happy ship. I've got to say, everybody got on extremely well. So it's a very happy part of my life, but it's a job. You know, I don't kind of miss it. When it was over, it's over. That's the thing as an actor, you're always thinking, where's the next job? And with COVID going on at the moment, I'm not quite sure where the next job is. But, you know, if it means I'm retired now, I'm retired now. But, you know, I've had a blessed career, really. I've done an awful lot of stage. I've been touring for the last 20 years since that finished, pretty much, and slipping in the odd television and the odd film and the odd trip abroad. So I've got nothing to complain about at all. But London's Burning was that main part. It was a fluke. I mean, it came out of nowhere. I would have carried on being a hopefully reasonably successful stage actor and still doing a lot of musicals and whatever. But it came along, and I'm incredibly grateful to it because it stayed in the public consciousness. It was a groundbreaking thing, you know. No one had done the fire brigade before. You had cop shows and police shows, you know, coming out of your ears, and pretty much the same with the medical dramas. But no one had done the fire brigade, and you know, I hope we did it justice. I think they ran it into the ground in the end, which is one of the reasons why I left. If you want me to get a tiny bit political, they only in as much as they cut back on the shouts, and that's what people wanted to see. And I think they changed the characters maybe a little too quickly. People viewing on a Sunday night, you know, at 9 o'clock, they get, you know, sucked into their characters. They like them, and it was about watching those people not only be amusing and interesting in their private lives, but also seeing them when the chips were down, being a hero when they're going into a burning fire. And that was something I was always very conscious of, playing Sicknote, who was not a funny man, but funny things happened to him. So you'd say he was a light character. But I always insisted that at least twice a series, you saw him up the sharp end, you know, doing some really serious work. Otherwise, you couldn't ever believe he would have become a fireman. And I think that was the same for all of us, really. Anyway, it's been lovely talking to you, Andrew, and I hope your podcast is a success, and all good wishes for the future.